DuMont back in Chicago for hour number 2 of Beyond the Beltway. Thank you very much for joining us. Dave Lundy is one of our Democrats this evening, along with Peter Hanna. Our Republicans are Judith Sherwin and Jay Gordon Kinsler, who is running for Congress against in the 6th Congressional District, just in the western suburbs of Chicago. Dave, I want to come back to something that you alluded to in hour number 1, because if you're a long time or a regular listener to this program, and you have been a regular guest on this program almost for 10 years now, they remember, or certainly I remember, you were a Democrat that was not in favor of impeachment. All right, and neither was Nancy Pelosi. She got pushed into it, and you have the left wing of the Democratic Party has been pushing everyone into that point, and obviously votes will be taken soon on the issue. Is the current situation with the Democratic Party worse than you thought it would be when you sort of were against it 6 months ago, or is it not as bad as you thought it would be?
I actually think your question misreads what actually happened here.
Okay.
Because it wasn't just me and Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi and most people I know who were you might call moderate Democrats who were opposed to impeachment. We were opposed to impeachment because we didn't think it was a clear case where the president was abusing his power in a way that you could explain and convict. When the story about Ukraine came out, for me personally, it was a complete 180. I was so shocked at how blatant the president was in holding up Ukraine, the machinations of Rudy Giuliani, of trying to create this predicate of corruption, when in fact what he was doing was using the power of his office and the money appropriated by Congress to hold up another country that was currently under and is currently under siege from Russia.
But
No, not but. There's no but here, Bruce.
No,
this was it.
This is my but is about the question I asked. Okay.
Sorry.
If all of that is true, and your interpretation of what happened is, I don't challenge your veracity here. The point is that one of the reasons why you were opposed to moving forward on impeachment, I'm going to interpret now, is that you didn't think there wasn't an easy bumper sticker sign to put on. It wasn't an easy case to make in the court of public opinion because it was a little convoluted. And yet you say then along comes the phone call and the transcript, and in your mind it clarified things.
Because
it changed it made you more of a yes, let's have an impeachment. So my question now is, now that it's all out there,
Yes.
do you believe, having watched all this discussion or hearsay that's been viewed as testimony, congressional testimony for 3 weeks now, do you believe you're closer to a political statement, a T-shirt, a button that capsulizes why Donald Trump should be thrown out of office, or because all of this stuff is now out there in the body politic, has it made it more difficult for you to make a clear-cut case to the independent voters?
No, look, previously I thought the biggest imperative was to beat him in 2020, and that impeachment on the other circumstances would hinder that. This changed it. For me, it is very clear. And the conclusion I reached, and I've talked to others who were in similar positions, the conclusion I reached was, we can't let the president do this. It's such a blatant abuse of power that I can't take those political considerations into effect any longer.
Judy, how do you see the same transformation of public opinion in the country?
Well, I mean, as I said in the first hour when you asked the question, the public opinion seems to be going in precisely the other direction. Before the first witness took the microphone in the Intelligence Committee, somebody, I think actually Fox News, was reporting that more than 50% of the people thought that the president should be impeached and removed from office. That, in fact, has changed quite a bit in the last, whatever it is, 3 weeks. All right, particularly in the states that are the blue wall, the former blue wall. Also on a national level, his popularity has gone up. The feeling about impeachment has. I know you're shaking your head.
Well, I'm shaking my head because your data is not correct.
Okay, my data isn't correct. That's fine. But the data that I have read, and again, the problem about facts, I have read a number of sites, and I make it a point to try to read a number of sites because this issue of facts being all over the place. And it seems that public opinion is moving in the president's direction. And I come back to where you were when you were saying no impeachment, let's just beat him at the polls. Find somebody to beat him at the polls. I mean,
worried about
look at Peter. Peter, what's your assessment of the evolution of the case against Donald Trump? Has Ukraine made it more difficult in the court of public opinion because it isn't a clear-cut case?
I think I would go back to what Adam Schiff said in his closing at the end of the Intelligence Committee hearings, which is, he was very somber about it, and he said what he had said in the op-ed, weeks or months earlier, which is he was reluctant to pursue impeachment. But he said what changed his mind, what really pushed him over the edge is, the day after the Mueller report was released is the day that Trump had this call with Ukraine. And it was as if, or maybe the day after Mueller testified, but it was like right after one of those things occurred, Trump was just out there, again, using his office to basically, for political favors for himself. And I think it really crystallized the issue in his mind that this is a person who he just doesn't accept checks and balances. There's no limit to his abuse of power if we don't do something. And I think the Democrats, I really believe it is a reluctant, they've moved reluctantly because they did want to just we're a year out from the election. They wanted to try in the polls. But I think, when you look at history, when you look back at this moment, it's going to be clear who acted in accordance with the Constitution, who acted with the best interest of the country, not themselves in mind. And, with all due respect to the folks in the room who disagree, with all due respect to Republicans across the country and conservatives, I think it's the Democrats who are doing the right thing and trying to check a president who sees no limit to his power.
Okay, well, we'll see if the voters agree with that. Yeah. Let's see if the callers agree with it. Let's go to Calvin, listening to us on KXLY in Spokane, Washington. Go ahead, Cal. Are you there? Calvin, are you there? Calvin, are you there on line one?
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead. Speak up.
I think the impeachment process is being used in completely the wrong way. And my solution would be it has to be bipartisan.
How do you get it to be bipartisan in this era that we live in? I agree with you. It would be great if you could get there, but I don't know how you get there.
It would take a modicum of statesmanship, which that's far gone. But my solution would be if there's, say, 75% Democrats in the House, then they need to have 25% Republicans also sign off on a bill that's going to support impeachment. So whether it's impeachment or whether it's a congressional hearing, you got to have bipartisan support, and I'd use the same ratio that the party.
Gotta go.
It's really not worth 3 hours.
DuMont back. Let's go to Steve in Oswego, Illinois. Go ahead. You're on the air, Steve.
Thank you, Bruce. I've caught your show 20-some years ago and have been listening since.
Well, thank you very much for your loyalty.
Yeah, it was a Birmingham station that I tuned into. Anyway, before I get to my point, Dr. Kinsler,
yeah,
I really hope that you win the primary. I don't live in your district, but I know who your opponent is, and you don't have to be toxic to be conservative. But that aside,
thanks, Steve.
Jonathan Turley is the one man with the sense in the room. He says, yes, if Trump did what you say he did, then yes, it's impeachable. However, you haven't proved it. So what happens if they go through the impeachment process, and the Senate does not convict, and then something comes out that proves that he committed an impeachable crime. You're going to impeach him again? Thank you.
What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, you could.
I don't think you would impeach him again for this. I think more evidence is coming out and will continue to come out. Sooner or later, Bolton's going to speak. And when Bolton speaks, he's going to back up the notion that Donald Trump ordered this and that it was what he referred to as Rudy's drug deal.
He's not speaking
we
for the
all
book.
know
Bolton's got an axe to grind.
Really,
How do you know that? Because numerous people said he called it Rudy's drug deal.
Are you, Judy?
Yes.
Are you worried if John Bolton says he's going to testify? Are you worried about that?
No, absolutely not.
Step to the mic.
Absolutely not. No.
Doctor, are you worried about it?
No,
Disgruntled employee?
Again, most of the people so far that have testified against our president have an axe to grind against him, and that's why this has been just highly partisan. You guys were talking before about now that more's coming out. Well, I mean, every day the general public, it's like propaganda, it's like brainwashing, and they just hear Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad. But most of the American people are starting to see this for what it is. It's very partisan, and it's very much that they don't want to legitimize the election and the president, and they want to reverse that. And I think people are getting downright upset about it. And I think if the Democrats were doing this to help stop Trump or help stop his reelection, they're just sadly mistaken, and this is going to backfire in a huge way. And, polls, but just the common guy you talk to on the street is starting to see this for what it is. I mean, when you talk to people in Washington or people, in these academic centers, you can kind of just keep convincing yourself of all these things. But the bottom line is, look at the basics. He was getting $400 million of taxpayer money to go to a foreign country. And I, for one, want to make sure that that money's being used wisely, and I want to make sure that it's not being squandered or given to somebody's relative that's going to somehow benefit somebody down the road.
Except
And
that there
that's what it's come down to.
Except that there was a legal review process that was undertaken before, and it passed muster. They said, yes, the $400 million is going to be used properly.
Just like the Mueller report and the TSA and
You're
all those
mixing
kind of
apples
things.
and oranges.
No, I'm not. I'm
and by the
saying
way,
that
you
they look
you
for a
just
crime.
slandered-
They're looking for
you
a
just
crime, and then they're
slandered.
trying to fix it.
You just slandered those witnesses who spoke, who did not have an axe to grind. Fiona Hill has an axe to grind with Donald Trump. These are all Republicans who were testifying. These are either career civil servants.
You can be a Republican and have an axe to grind
Right,
against
but you're
Donald Trump.
talking about
There is
people
such
who
a
are either
thing.
career civil servants or career military
lot of
people.
That's
like
part of the
Vindman.
problem.
There's
the
a lot of
career-
Democrats that like our president.
Come on,
No, that is-
you cannot now say I'm sorry, you cannot this attempt by the Republicans to say if you have chosen a career in public service, you are bad and
No,
untrustworthy
that is
a
not-
slander against the entire civil
That is
service in
not-
this country.
That is not what
ever said it.
anybody is saying.
That's exactly what you're saying.
Well, then
It's
you
the
don't even know
deep
what I'm
state.
saying because you
Just
didn't
look
let me
at-
say
Judy,
it.
say what you're going to say.
All right. So, well, there's two things I want to say. First of all, just in listening to the people who testified at the Intelligence Committee, they clearly were very unhappy with Donald Trump, thinking that he was controlling the foreign policy of the United States of America. Don't shake your head. Let me finish. And they were annoyed by that. They were clearly very annoyed by that, and they didn't like it. That was one thing that came out very clearly. And it was really kind of upsetting that these people had more to say about it than the President of the United States. That's the first thing.
Were you upset? I want to ask you a question. I want to upset.
I wanted
because-
to make a point
Go
about
ahead, make
bipartisanship.
the
if I
point.
can.
Make the point, and then
Real quick, and it's something that Dr. Kinsler said, and there should be bipartisanship that our caller said. In fact, there has been bipartisanship. The vote that was taken in the House, there were 2 Democrats who said, "Don't do this." All right, so the only bipartisanship that there has been in this procedure is that 2 Democrats have broken with their caucus for whatever reason. I have no idea why. They don't believe there should be an impeachment, and they have sided with the Republicans. So I think that this is something that does need to be taken into account, and I think that the State Department has always had issues with presidents, has always had issues on certain foreign policy issues that they think they know better. And that's clearly what I saw. I'm not slandering them. I'm just listening to
For our
what
country.
they said.
It's not good for our country. It's not good for when our president goes abroad
To have
deal with
experts?
North Korea, to deal with China, to deal with our NATO allies, to constantly having this Democrat Congress badgering and belittling and, putting them through this. It's not good for America. And I think Americans are starting to see that.
In the first wave of testimony, the one thing that as I'm always looking at it as to how do I perceive it's playing in the court of public opinion, and I'm just saying is that the ambassador, the female ambassador, who lost her job. I thought she made a very compelling case. She clearly is someone who could have an axe to grind. I totally agree with that. I factor that into my assessment. But if I'm an average person who happens to be watching this hearing, I can see in that case, I don't think it's necessarily an impeachable offense, but I did not see any reason why Rudy Giuliani and others had to go out of their way to rough up, to dirty up this ambassador as she was out the door. She clearly was in the way. The president clearly has the right to relieve her, but I don't think under the issue of fairness and just decency, I don't think you have to rough up a 30-year employee of the State Department and say all bad things about her. I think in the court of public opinion, I think that looked bad. To me, it reinforced the one thing the Democrats already know about Donald Trump. He's a real jerk.
He's a New
Democrat, and I could say, I'm
not
not
an
going to use the other
impeachable
word I was
offense.
going to use because we're on the radio. But you know what? He's not a really nice guy. But a lot of Republicans say, you know what? He's not a really nice guy, but he's on our side. And that's good enough for us.
Well, he's on Putin's side.
Oh, God.
Yes. Who benefited? Who benefited from Donald Trump's undermining and threatening the Ukrainian regime? Putin.
Who benefited from the release of javelins as opposed to
Right.
blankets in the war against Russia?
Yes, but it was not just the it was not just no. It was not just
Gave them
blankets.
javelins.
They trained the Ukrainian military.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
You
right.
cannot say that there was
Gave them
nothing
nothing
on the
to-
military.
They trained in the military on
Nothing
the
to work
use of the
with.
blankets.
Right.
My question is this. Would you acknowledge that if one president is asked for javelins and they say no, and another president comes along and says, we're going to give you javelins so you can fight the big bad bear,
Right.
that the guy who gives you the javelins is probably more in tune of trying to get you to beat the bear?
Until he wasn't.
Can I? Yeah, and just said one minor point and make of it what you will. But the president before the current president of Ukraine was wildly corrupt Russian puppet. So I think Obama and that administration and his State Department had to factor that into what they were providing them. So I mean, I wasn't in the administration, but before Zelensky came
All
along,
those that testified, by the way, all those Democrat witnesses who testified, they all said that Donald Trump deserves the credit for giving them.
I didn't say anything to the
that.
I didn't say anything to the contrary.
Say one thing.
Yes, Doctor.
So first of all, what I have to say is I have to do a waiver and everything. I'm still active in the Army Reserve, so anything I say does not reflect the opinion of the Department of Defense or the Department of Army.
We will
This
not
is-
hold it
that-
against
right.
you.
Well, I have to make sure anyone listening also knows that. These are my own personal opinions, but I've served under 3 presidents, Bush, Obama, and now Trump. And I can tell you, as far as who has their back, I've never seen the morale of the troops as high as it is now under Trump for a multitude of reasons, one of which he actually gave our men and women in the service raises. In the 8 years Obama was president, they did not get one raise. I used to be the president of the Park District of Glen Ellen. We would give people raises 3 to 4% per year. Our military, and I'm not talking about guys that have went for 1 or 2 deployments to places like Afghanistan or Iraq, but some of them 5 or 6. They have 2 or 3, 4 kids, a wife. they couldn't hardly afford with their salaries during the Obama years to stay in the military. In fact, we lost a lot of great warriors because they had to get out of the military to find another job. So,
No-
So he gave them
so
money.
he has their back, and that's what I have experienced personally.
No disagreement with you on the raises. I know that it was an issue under Bush. It was an issue under Obama. I'm glad they got raises. But I'm not sure that your fellow soldiers in Syria, given what he did in Syria by withdrawing the way he did, would agree with you about the
if
morale.
my son or my nephews are still my nephews are still in, I'm glad he gets them out of places where they're not needed or where there's not a clear need for American presence, because that's what a president has to decide. It's a huge decision to send somebody in harm's way.
Got to pause. 1-800-723-8289 from coast to coast and border to border and around the world on BeyondTheBeltway.com. I'm Bruce DuMont.
This guy was like,
Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Thanks very much. A reminder again, if you have, if you're a regular listener to this program and you've enjoyed it for many, many years, or just maybe you recently discovered it, we get this program to you via satellite. There are growing costs in the production of this program. And again, as we look to 2020, we'd like to be here each and every Sunday night to provide you with a bipartisan, a discussion, and as you heard tonight, sometimes a very combustible discussion involving people with great passion on all sides. That's the pledge of this program. We're in our 39th year. We've been doing it for 39 years. But if you would like to support this program, you can go to the GoFundMe page and you look up Beyond the Beltway. It's very simple to do it if you've never done it before. GoFundMe.com is where you go. Look up Beyond the Beltway. It's a real quick way where you can make a donation to support. And again, I can promise you every penny will be used for satellite services to keep this program going. Again, we had a very good response last week when I mentioned it for the first time. So if you want to do it, you can go to the phone right now, or in the holiday giving time, we would appreciate your support. And again, that's for everybody, whether you're listening. In other words, it's always nice to go on that sheet and or go and check into it and find some people that you know. But it's even nicer when you go there and you find people that you don't know. They're out in Radio Land. Someone's been listening to the show for 25 years. They live in Spokane, Washington. Again, you know, they sent along a very generous gift. So that's really nice to run into the people out in Radio Land and now on YouTube that support the program. So GoFundMe.com. On another point, completely, if I don't say this tonight, I will be lynched when I get home. But again, today is my grandson's 3rd birthday, and Jesse Samuel, you're 3 years old, and I know he's a regular listener to this program, and we'll be conversing all about the impeachment issue when I see him.
Wait, there are children listening to this program?
There are children. Actually, yes, supposed to they start right at birth. I lose them at the I lose my teenage granddaughters. But anyway,
They come.
happy birthday, Jesse Samuel. I want to go to you, Peter, because you wanted to make a point on the shooting in Pensacola. What happened, why it happened, and how do we make sure it never happens again?
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to the doctor about, you know, with respect to sort of relationships we have with other countries and their troops coming and training in our officer schools. I think, though, the point that I want to emphasize is I think the president's response was really misguided. And I think coming out after such a tragedy and just saying, look, I've spoken to the Saudi king. He's really upset about this. The whole Saudi kingdom is really upset about this. You know, it's just so tone deaf to me. Saudi Arabia is the #1 exporter of the ideology that fuels, you know, some of the most militant sorts of terroristic activity around the globe. We are, and I mean, it's not just Trump, Obama, Bush, you know, Clinton, been very, very chummy with the Saudi government for a long time. And the one thing I would have given Trump credit for in his, like, quote unquote, draining the swamp is if he actually reevaluated that relationship. We're not as reliant on Saudi oil. The rest of the world is. But I don't know why, a journalist gets literally butchered in Istanbul and, you know, we turn a blind eye. Government is incredibly repressive. We turn a blind eye. And now one of their officers, one of their, you know, members of their military, shoots 3 of our officers in a naval.
Because he hates America.
Trump.
She said, no, because the person said he hated America.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, and the president comes out and, what if this had been a Mexican immigrant or an illegal immigrant? What if this had been someone, I don't know, someone an avowed Islamic terrorist doing this outside in California or something? I mean, Trump's response would be completely different.
Dr. Kinsler, go ahead, your response.
First of all, on behalf of Bruce, the show, and my panel members, because we talked about it, break, our condolences, prayers, and thoughts go out to the family of our servicemen that go. When you send your son or daughter into the military, especially when they're garrisoned at home base, the last thing you would expect is to lose them and go through this tragedy. So our thoughts and prayers are with the family. After saying that, this is something that needs to thoroughly be investigated. I mean, this should be intolerable for us as a nation to stand and let this happen. And this isn't the first time. Going back to June of 2009 at Little Rock, we had one recruiting officer killed by a jihadist, by an Islamic terrorist. Back in 11 of 2009, we had the Major Hassan, another terrorist, actually killed 13.
Should we stop the practice of training foreign fighters? Because obviously, if our goal, and certainly it has been with Saudi Arabia, we want to sell them lots of stuff.
Right.
They are a customer.
Right.
If you buy a new airplane, you have to fly the airplane, I don't think there's any meaningful way that you really stop training foreign nationals to
You have to look
military
at
people.
the risk versus the benefits.
Well, you've got
going
to
on. We
monitor
had
them now.
we
Probably
had
need
four,
to vet
four
them a
Marines
little
killed
better.
at Chattanooga. Now we've got Pensacola. We need to have vetting, and we need to have better vetting of people, particularly who we let in to any military installations, because we know there is a deep-seated hatred for us, for our way of life. We would not be able to sit at a conference like this in a radio and broadcast these views and talk about,
Right.
What we think of our president or what we think about our congressional leaders. We wouldn't probably survive, when we walked out the door. So I mean, for all the problems we have, we still have a great system. We need to protect it. And any enemy of the United States that wants to take that away or infringe on that needs to be met with the full force of our military in America.
I think everybody agrees. Do you agree, everybody agrees with, I think, all your points, Doctor.
Absolutely. And I was struck that during the break you talked about you were a little disappointed in the president's reaction as well. And I think that it's something that, I think back to what his reaction during Khashoggi, and he almost didn't react. He basically ignored it and didn't want to say anything that might possibly offend the Saudis, with whom he has a lot of business relationships. That's not slander. That's fact. And I think that we are in a position where, frankly, our president's reactions are governed by who he has financial relationships with, thus the Turkey situation, thus Saudi Arabia, and thus Russia.
Judy.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, I do think that's a slander. It's an assumption that has not been proven.
Which part?
The fact that he makes his decisions based on who he has business relationships with. I think he makes decisions, as has been pointed out, I think by Peter. It isn't just Trump. There was Bush, there was Obama. They have all gone soft on the Saudis. We have to remember that this is the country that spawned the 9/11 hijackers. And quite frankly, I was disappointed in his response to this, and I think that there needs to be a very strong response to what's going on
here.
here.
Don't we need their oil anymore?
Right.
But don't we need their,
We
their
need
landing pads? We need their
And we need
land so we can land our fighters
We
in the Middle East.
also need them as the natural enemy of Iran. And
Right.
so I think, we have to take a look at some of these things.
Of Iran.
Iran, yes. And I think that I'm unhappy with the president's response. I wish he'd had a little more fervor in his response to what had happened. But I think that he has to deal with the Saudis which means he has to have a somewhat measured response in what has happened here. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do understand that there are other factors, and the factors are not his business relationships. His factors are American foreign policy in the Middle East. These people are something we have to deal with in the Middle East.
Peter.
It's very important.
I think one of the points that Dave was making and Judy has responded to is that the president sometimes takes a transactional approach to a lot of policy making. It's really not intended as a slander, and to me and Dave, I guess it's a fact. And he's been pretty clear about that with respect to NATO and other alliances. You know, what are they paying into it? Should we be committed to it?
Absolutely, I agree with you. I agree with you on that.
And I think there's a degree of that could be seen in the Saudi, not necessarily his personal finances, although there's probably some of that too, but just with respect to how much they're paying for military equipment, et cetera. To answer your question, though, do we need Saudi Arabia? America, and hopefully the doctor will back me up, has a pretty substantial presence in the Gulf. We have allies in North Africa. We have obviously allies in Central and Europe. We can deal with Iran from the sea. We can deal with Iran any way we like. Saudi Arabia continues to be important and relevant because I think they've poured money into building personal relationships with people in American politics, and
So
that's
they've
how
been
they're doing
smart.
it. I mean, they've been shrewd.
They've been
but
smart, as has the state of Israel, right?
Trump-
haven't they both been smart?
I think both have been very shrewd and artful in how they've gone about building American relationships. But I think, if you are buying the Donald Trump like drain the swamp, kind of like slogan, why isn't he draining that swamp? I mean, Saudi Arabia is the net exporter of terrorism in the world and gave us most of the 9/11 attackers and continue to do it.
Let me ask this question because you referenced it, and I don't want to lose track of it. This past week in NATO, the president brought up again the dues he feels are due from NATO members. A percentage of their gross national product should go into their defenses, and that they haven't really paid their dues. They're well behind. He did this in an embarrassing way, sitting with Justin Trudeau sitting 2 feet from him. But what's wrong with the president of the United States demanding that NATO pay its fair share? Dave Lundy.
Nothing. President Obama did the same thing, and in fact, the percentage of GDP being paid into by
Did he ever do it in
No,
a
hang on.
public way?
He never did it in the obnoxious way that Donald Trump does, but he did it. He did it in an effective way that
He used the money.
resulted. He did. The money was going in the right direction when Donald Trump took office.
Any
This is not
president-
new.
Presidents should.
We got to pause. Back shortly. The Republicans are in shock. Bruce DuMont back in Chicago. Let's go to Mark listening to us on KION in Carmel, California. Go ahead, Mark.
Hey, good evening, Bruce, and season's greetings to the best show on radio.
Thank you very, very much, Mark.
Put 'em back.
Appreciate
You
it.
bet. And listen, so apparently the IG's report's going to drop tomorrow, Durham's report.
Uh-huh.
No,
No, not
Durham's
Durham.
report.
No,
Not
the
Durham.
Horowitz.
Horowitz.
Okay, well,
The
listen,
Horowitz
we-
report comes out
We
tomorrow.
still gotta wait
Durham
for it.
is the U.S. attorney from Connecticut, and he's probably a couple of months away, and he has subpoena powers. But go ahead.
Well, listen, I'm thinking it's going to change the paradigm of everything because, frankly, I think that's one of the reasons the Democrats are pushing this thing so hard, so fast, is because they're scared to death that the things that are going to be released in both the IG report and the ensuing Durham report are going to be so damning that they can't handle the hit.
All right, let's let Dave Lundy has a comment for you, Mark.
So when that report comes out tomorrow, and it is not at all what you expect, and it does not back up a deep state conspiracy, and it does not say that, in fact, the FBI, CIA, Obama administration conspired to undermine President Trump and did not spy on President Trump, will you come back on next week and tell us, oops, you were wrong? Because everybody in Fox
Absolutely.
News land believes this. And yet the reports that have come out, there have been numerous reports, leaks in various newspapers that have come out and said the IG report is not going to back up the deep state conspiracy.
And the Attorney General
I think it's
doesn't
media
like the
wishful
report.
thinking.
And the Attorney General doesn't like the report.
Right.
Well, that's one of the leaks. That's
All
one
of
of
the
the
leaks.
All it needs to have, though, is just a reality check for you and me is 1 or 2 lines or paragraphs for, folks to sink their teeth into to say, like, deep state proven, and that's probably what will happen.
Right.
No, it'll be low level. It'll be the
Right. It'll be low level
the Peter
people.
Strzok, Lisa Page. How did you like
It's not
Lisa?
even going to be Peter Strzok and Lisa Page.
How do you like Lisa Page coming out and blasting the president? She's so offended by what the president mocked her.
I didn't think
As
it
a
was,
woman,
As a woman.
were you offended by his mockery of her?
No.
That was not. Okay.
No.
You thought it was funny.
I thought it was funny.
Okay. Roger in Austin, Texas on KLBJ. Go ahead, Roger.
Good evening. Best to you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Roger.
Democrats keep repeating their overwhelming evidence talking point, and now even undisputed, falsely implying that Trump's refusal to lend them any credibility in their efforts is somehow agreement. Democrats' evidence is largely hearsay and opinion, and it's underwhelming. Really, not overwhelming. It's underwhelming. If this thing gets to the Senate, it's all over for the Democrats, and they're going to have to live with the fallout of their partisan hatred of Trump. They've hollered impeachment for 3 years, and their credibility on this is zero. Democrats are driving a deep rift in our national leadership, and that promises far greater negative consequence than anything related to Ukraine or those petty attacks on emoluments and all that other nonsense against Trump. They've succeeded in lowering the bar to partisan attack on future presidents, and we're going to be living with this for a long time.
Right.
Roger, stay on the line. Peter Hanna, I want you to respond to that because I think he was zeroing in on you as well as David.
Hey, Roger. Well, not surprisingly, I disagree. And I could tell you that with respect to the notion that it's hearsay, it's actually not. We had Sondland, we had, I think his name David Hill, Fiona Hill. We had multiple people who heard what they heard and testified to that fact. But, just a broader point, the Democrats have asked for the people who are in the room to come testify, and Trump has said no. So, I do find it funny that, there has been no exculpatory evidence and no favorable evidence put forward by the Trump campaign. And every time the Democrats have said, could you please produce these witnesses or produce these materials that could potentially not be hearsay and be direct from the horse's mouth,
The whistleblower has not come forward.
But it doesn't matter. The whistleblower said that this conversation about, Ukraine aid happened. And then we've had 10 people corroborate exactly that fact. His or her identity is immaterial. And the idea of get the whistleblower.
What about his
He said
motivation?
there was a quid
What
pro
what
quo.
about his motivation? Whistleblower's
it's immaterial.
motivation.
I could have a axe to grind against, my company. I work for DuPont. And then all of a sudden there's some information that they're dumping chemicals into a river. Whether or not I have an axe to grind doesn't change the fact that they're dumping chemicals into a river. And whether or not this whistleblower has an axe to
What
grind
about
doesn't change the fact that
in a political climate, though, Peter? If the person who is the whistleblower has had relations with the DNC, is also worked on, close with Vice President Biden when he was the vice president, don't you think that a lot of average people who are just out there in radio and TV land, they might say, you know what, here's a guy who wants Donald Trump to look bad. The guy also, by the way, was charged with leaking information,
Right.
and he was kicked out of the White House. Now, you talk about a disgruntled employee. Disgruntled employees, can disgruntled employees tell the truth? Yes. But can disgruntled employees say that they acted without any motivation? I don't think so.
But we're still waiting for anything that was in the whistleblower report to be proven false.
Yeah.
Roger, thanks for calling. You were right on with your comments. I think the Democrats are finding that they're hurting America, not helping.
Yes, I
Jay
agree.
Gordon
Thank you so
Kinsler
much.
has been with us this evening. He is a Republican. He wants to go to the United States House of Representatives. Judy Sherwin is not interested in going to the House of Representatives. She is an attorney. She also teaches at Loyola University. And also Peter Hanna has been with us. He teaches at Chicago-Kent College of Law. He's with the ACLU. And Dave Lundy has been with here. He's with A-Line Communication. Nice to have you back. We had strong Democrats this evening, strong Republicans. It's been a Donnybrook. Things got very, very tense, but it is the holiday season. No punches were thrown,
I'm sorry we didn't get to toilets.
and we didn't get to toilets. Didn't get to the toilet.
Healthcare.
I'm Bruce DuMont. Our thanks to Fritz Goldman and the ever-popular Andrew Marshall for their assistance in the production of this program. Until next Sunday night, this is Bruce DuMont. Good night from Chicago.